Good morning, everyone. You can hear me, yes? All right. Just one final note, if you have a recorder or a phone, make sure it's up here and obviously mute it if you can. Welcome, everyone. We are here today to introduce the 42nd manager in Chicago White Sox history, Pedro Grifol. I'm Len Casper, one of the White Sox radio broadcasters, and we have a few people we would like to acknowledge right off the top, members of Pedro's family, including his wife, Allie, and his daughters, Lauren, Amanda, and Camilla. Pedro is a Miami, Florida native who attended Florida State, later finished his degree at Excelsior University. He was the Florida High School Player of the Year as a senior and a college All-American in 1991. A catcher by trade, he played 9 seasons in the Twins and Mets systems. He has worked in the Mariners and Royals organizations over the past 23 seasons. You could say he's a lifer. He's been a scout, a minor league manager, instructor, a director of minor league operations, a big league hitting coach, a catching coach, a quality control coach, a bench coach, and a winter league manager. He was on the staff of the World Series winning Kansas City Royals in 2015. And he's now a major league manager. So those are the big resume bullet points, many of which you've already read about, but we'll hear much more about the qualitative part of his background and his resume now. Let's turn the microphone over to the White Sox Senior Vice President and General Manager, Rick Hahn.
Thank you, Len, and thank you all for being here today. Perhaps more importantly, thank you to Major League Baseball for letting us stick to our previous schedule of having this press conference today despite the World Series rain out. Today's a pretty exciting day around here. You may see me smiling a little bit more than you have over the past year and gushing a little bit more than I have in the past year, and that's because it's a little difficult for me to contain the excitement that many of us feel being able to present to you all Pedro Grifol is our new manager. I will talk a little bit about the process, answer or preemptively give some answers to some things that I'm guessing are on people's mind. We'll then do the awkward jersey thing, and then we'll let Pedro take this thing over. I think as an organization and as a baseball department, Jerry, Kenny, myself, we're very proud of the process that led us to Pedro. It was a exhaustive and expansive search. We've heard me make mention before to our lists in a drawer of potential candidates that we pull out when there is an opening. I think that initial list for manager had about 22 or 24 names on it. As we started to hear from other people in the organization and outside the organization, friends of the program, that list swelled to about 30. We did due diligence dug into just about all of them, and ultimately selected 8 to sit down with for first round interviews. Those 8 were from 7 different organizations, including the White Sox, throughout baseball. Those first round interviews involved myself, Chris Getz, Jeremy Haber, and Daniel Zion, all of who are present today, and appreciate the work and effort that our department was able to put into this. Ultimately, Kenny and I sat down with a few candidates, and after that there was a final round involving finalists with Jerry, Kenny, and myself in Arizona. I will say, and I'll get to this in a moment, a little bit more about why Pedro. But Pedro was actually the second of the 8 that we sat down with, and from about an hour into our conversation, it became very clear that the bar had been risen, and that the rest of the group that we were going to be meeting with over the course of the following week or 10 days had a high standard to meet based on what Pedro presented that day. I think at the end of actually our first meeting, I said to him something to the effect that I know obviously you've been working towards becoming a big league manager for the last 20 years or so, and I can't imagine that not happening here in the not-too-distant future, whether it's with us or somebody else. And we were very fortunate that it wound up being with us in the end. I know there's been some information leaked out prior to today about the status of Pedro's coaching staff. The only thing, or the only specifics I can get in today, or we can get into today, are about those individuals that we are certain will be on his next staff. Ethan Katz and Kurt Hassler will return in their previous roles, and we're pleased to also share with you that Charlie Montoya will be joining Pedro's staff as a bench coach, as his bench coach. The remainder of those spots, we will go through a process with Pedro to conduct some interviews. We have a number of names, none of which we can really get into specifics about because they are mostly under contract with other clubs. There will be some internal candidates from within the White Sox organization for some of these spots, but I suspect at the end of the day, based on the conversations we've had over the last week or so, or a couple of weeks, I should say, that the majority of those spots will be filled by individuals outside the White Sox organization. Why Pedro? This is the part where I need to catch myself a little bit from going too far over the top. A little too gushing, perhaps, but we sit here today and with the hiring of Pedro feel like we are taking a major step to putting ourselves back on track on the trajectory that we all felt we were on over the previous seasons prior to last season's disappointment. In Pedro, we are hiring someone who is a renowned communicator, a modern baseball mind who is seeking to build a cohesive and inclusive clubhouse environment, and one where the attention to detail and the accountability will be priorities. Eventually, it's probably more important you hear from the man himself than me. But at the end of the day, after Jerry, Kenny, and I sat down with Pedro, it was very clear to all three of us that he would be the unanimous choice to address some of the things that we needed to improve in. Again, I could go on about this for the next 2 hours probably, about how Pedro fits, and I'll answer some of your questions when we get to that point, but I think it's probably more important that you hear from the man himself. So we'll go ahead and, with respect to Josh Harrison for sharing his number, and of course Juan Uribe for allowing a number man to wear number 5 for the White Sox, let's go ahead and present to you Pedro Grifol.
I'm extremely proud and honored to be wearing this uniform here, and thank you, Rick, for your kind words. First and foremost, I want to thank God for this amazing ride and great opportunity. I want to thank Jerry, Kenny, Rick, Jeremy, Chris, for a very detailed and thorough process full of great baseball conversations. I felt like we were back 20 years ago in the clubhouse just talking baseball and strategy. I want to thank my family here today, my wife, Allie, my daughters Lauren, her fiance Matt, Amanda, her husband Hugo, Camila, no husband and fiancés yet, and my mother-in-law Gloria. A quick story. You guys epitomize the word sacrifice. Quick story, in 2011, it was about my third year as a farm director, and came home from the complex one day and I told my wife, Allie, I said, you know, I'm starting to get that itch to go back on the field. And right away she jumped, being so supportive, she jumped right back and said, well, go ahead and do it. And I said, well, you know, let me sit down and talk to the girls about it. So we had dinner that night. And the girls, they were younger, obviously 10, 11 years younger. And I told them, I said, you know, I've been in the office for 3 years. I don't think I like it that much. My passion's on the field. I'm getting an itch to go back on the field. Right away they jumped and said, just go ahead and do it. And I said, not so fast, there's a couple of things we got to talk about. The first thing is finances. Obviously a farm director makes a hell of a lot more money than a minor league manager. This house we're living in, we're probably going to have to downsize from this house and go into a condo close to the school in Phoenix. And then the last thing, and most importantly, is I'm going to have to go to winter ball, continue to go to winter ball, and make ends meet. And that'll take me another 3.5 months away from the house. And they snapped right back at me and said, how in the world can you tell us to chase our dreams if you're not chasing yours? I can't thank you enough for that. I can't thank you for the sacrifices that you guys have made for this day right here. You guys are my rock. You've supported me throughout. I wouldn't be sitting up here without you. Thank you. At home watching and always in my heart, my dad, Pedro Grifol Sr., my mom, Gloria Campos, my grandmother, Gori Vasquez, one of the strongest women I know, my sisters, Monica and Nicole, my brother Andrew, and the rest of my family, friends, and agent. I've taken the road less traveled to this position. And when you do that, you definitely don't sit up here alone. So please bear with me as I mention a few of these people who have invested so much in me. Mike Martin Sr., John McMitchin, who hired me as a scout in 2000 in South Florida, the late Roger Youngward, Dayton Moore, thank you for your leadership, George Brett, Ted Simmons, John Bowles, and Dave Wallace. Thank you for sharing your knowledge when you didn't have to. Ned Joes, Mike Matheny, Eduardo Perez, Raul Ibanez, Steve Phillips, Rafael Colon, Gene Watson, and so many more. I can't thank you enough for your tough love and friendship throughout the years. Lastly, I want to thank the staff and players in Kansas City the last 10 seasons, especially Salvador Perez. Te quiero, caballo. I know you're watching. I've been in this division the last 10 years, and I know this club well. It's an extremely talented club on both sides of the field, both sides of the ball. Without getting too deep into some other things, here are some of the things that you can expect from the 2023 White Sox. We will communicate. Aquí falta de comunicación no va a haber. We will be fundamentally sound. We will play with passion, pride for this uniform. This means something. We will respect the game, our fans, and earn their trust. We will be prepared to control the strike zone on both sides of the ball. We will work hard and play winning baseball every night. And we will definitely hold each other accountable. I truly see great things happening here, and I'm really excited to be a part of it. Thank you.
We will open up for questions now. Bruce?
First of all, Pedro, welcome to Chicago. Congratulations.
Thank you.
One of the major disconnects, it appeared last year for the White Sox, was dealing with injury and how to go out there and try to perform injured, and at still point being able to give 100%. How would you deal with that situation, which appeared to be a big problem for the White Sox players understanding that message?
Well, I think it starts in spring training with an individual plan, right? And just making sure that these guys are getting some time off. You know, as we raise the bar in the intensity of the practices, you also got to give them a little bit of rest and recovery. So when the season starts, we're going to communicate extremely well with the guys. We're going to know, they're going to know exactly when they're going to have days off, so that they can give us the very best, knowing that they might have a Sunday off with Monday scheduled off day. So I think communication is a big part of this thing. And I also know that we have to collaborate. We have to have a collaborated effort when it comes to guys' bodies and how they go about it. You know. So, and I think I want to talk about the sports.
Yeah, still working.
Okay. Basically, communication, talking to the trainers, strength and conditioning, and set up a plan for each and every player.
Just as a follow-up, the message last year was, we want you to play hurt, but we want you not to go 100%. How would you handle that situation as you being the manager?
You know, that's a good question. I memean, guys play hurt and through pain all the time. Sometimes you got to back off a little bit to keep these guys on the field. So it's going to be communication on my part with the player to see how much he can really give us that night. And if we feel that he's going to help us win that night, then he'll play. If not, we'll give him the day off and wait till the next day.
Mark?
Pedro, congratulations. You were with the Royals, so you got a good look at this White Sox team. You see the abundance of talent. I guess on the flip side, what did you see from across the field that you thought might have been maybe missing a little bit for, you know, a team that underachieved last year?
Well, like I said before, this is an extremely talented ball club. And it was a really difficult club to prepare for, because if the energy was high, they can beat anybody in the game. And if the energy wasn't, you know, we were able to, you know, to have some success against them. So my job's going to be, and our staff's job's going to be, to make sure that that energy is high every night, and we're prepared to win the ball game.
Go ahead, Benny.
Rick, you mentioned a lot of things about outside the organization. Pedro is obviously from outside the organization. As you guys embarked on this process and found your next manager, what are the things that Pedro brings from outside the organization that you guys needed in here?
I think all organizations run the risk of becoming a little insular, and you know, I think all 30 of us are guilty of falling in love with our own guys that you draft and develop and have, whether you've traded for or signed as free agents with expectations. And sometimes it's good to get a little bit of a reality check from outside, and a more objective point of view, let's say. And I will say, I think it was important, given, you know, some of the processes over the last few turnovers that we've had, to make clear that we were open-minded to different points of view, and that we were interested in what others had to say about us and how we were perceived and how we could get better. We obviously have had a fair amount of success, but not enough. And when you get to that point of frustration that we all felt last year, and knowing that you needed to change perhaps the way we went about some things, I think it was essential for us to hear from as many different voices as we could about how to get this thing better and how to get it on track. Doesn't mean that we don't have some very high caliber coaches and scouts as part of this organization. It's a matter of complementing those points of view from time to time, and getting a little bit of a reality check, perhaps.
And to follow up, Pedro, what are some of the new ideas or fresh perspectives that you can bring to this organization?
Well, communication is one of the biggest parts of my leadership, right? And I think it's really important that you empower players, you empower coaches, you collaborate. Everybody's a big part of this. I think our successes are tied together. And raising the energy level every single day is extremely important. As far as, new ideas and analytics and all this stuff, I'm well versed in this stuff. Ideas are stuff that come up daily, especially when you have a very creative staff. But we're just going to be prepared to play. We're going to work hard, and we're going to be prepared to play.
One thing I want to amplify from that, and not to get too deep into the weeds, but we spent a lot of time with Pedro talking through improvements to our pregame planning, something that he was heavily involved in the past, as well as our how we prepare from an offensive standpoint to get the most out of the traits of the players on the roster. How we go about our business in that area in particular, I think you're going to see a lot different from what we had in the past.
Andrew, I know.
Hi, Andy Seligman, AP. This is for both of you. 2-3 years ago, this was a young, vibrant, fun-loving team. How important is it to get that energy back, and how do you go about restoring that?
I'll start with saying it's essential. And look, we felt extremely proud of what we were able to accomplish in the early parts of this rebuild and the position that we were in a few years back. Even though we decided that we had to make a change after 2020, I think it was pretty clear that the arrow was pointing up for us. And thus far, what we've been able to show for that is one division title and a first-round exit. And that's not who we envisioned ourselves being. And part of that sort of disappointment, I think, permeated the way the clubhouse was viewed itself. Recapturing that energy, that excitement, keeping the language clean, but some of the things that we talked about in terms of our attitude and approach of how we're going to go about a game, that we're going to be, again, keeping it clean. We're there to beat you and to exploit every edge that presents itself to us along the way.
I just think it starts in spring training. I think when we hit the field in spring training, the level of intensity to our practices, the level of intensity to our cage work, the details, attacking margins are going to be extremely critical in developing the culture and the chemistry of this club. And I think these players are hungry for it. I think they want it. And once we get started, they're going to see how prepared they're going to be to, again, keeping it clean, kick somebody's butt.
Let's go over here, Jeff. Sorry. Coach? Got one?
Hey, Joe. First of all, welcome to Chicago. I'm sure that you've looked this roster up and down, and of course, being in the same division with this team. What would you think, from your perspective, would be the most pressing needs that you would like to see filled on this team?
Well, we got to improve defensively, obviously, and I feel that fundamentally we got to improve. And again, I go back to the intensity level and the energy that we got to bring to our preparation. This is a very good club. It's a club that's prepared to win, to do great things. And I personally I'm gonna be a stickler to the preparation, the energy is going to get us where we want to go. These guys are going to come to play every single night. As far as adding and subtracting from our roster, we haven't really gotten there yet. I think we will at some point here in the next couple of weeks, but I just think this club is prepared to do great things. And I think with a few adjustments on just the mental side of it and the approach to our practices and our preparation, it's going to be sufficient.
Would you like to see a Jose Abreu in your future?
I think all 30 managers want to see a Jose Abreu in their lineup. I mean, he's obviously a guy from the other side that when you see him play, he comes to play every day. He works hard. He plays hurt. He performs. He's performed for a long time. But again, we have to sit down and see how this roster shakes out in the next couple of weeks and beyond, and see where we go from there.
Pedro, as far as Montoya goes, I'm curious if you had a past relationship with him, and in any case, what stood out to you as a fit as the bench coach?
We've spoken a few times, but I just have so much respect for him and what he's done in the game. Here's a guy that was in the minor leagues for a long time as a minor league manager, got an opportunity to get to the big leagues. He was a bench coach for Tampa. He's extremely smart, bilingual, got a chance to manage in the American League East. I'm really excited to bring him on board. I think he's going to help us. He's going to help me tremendously.
But how important do you think it is to have someone who's done the managerial, been in that seat before for your first go around in the big leagues in this position?
You'll hear me say this 1,000 times. If I'm the smartest guy in the room, we got a problem. So I think it's extremely important. This guy's done it, right? He's done it the last 3 years. He's had success, and I'm really happy to have him on board.
Go with Cheryl over here, Jeff. Sorry. Thanks.
Hi, Pedro. Cheryl Ray Stout with WBEZ Radio. As far as your staff, your coaching staff, what attributes are you looking for in some of the coaches you want to hire?
Communication skills is the most important thing for me, and a lot of these guys that we're discussing are bilingual. Relational skills is extremely important. They got to be detailed. Their work ethic's got to be off the charts. Creativity is important. You can't stay the same. You got to keep moving forward and attacking margins. So there are some attributes we're looking at, but to start, communication skills are the top of the list.
How do you like to work with your staff? Do you like them to have autonomy, or do you like them to be part of it all the time?
We're all in this thing together. I anticipate everybody feeling comfortable going out of their lane with respect. I anticipate that. I want that. I want people telling me, I want our staff telling me what they feel we need to do on a daily basis that's going to improve us and prepare us to play. I think it's going to be an enjoyable environment where they're going to be free and comfortable to go out and teach and do what they do best.
Hey, Lamont.
Hey, Pedro, you mentioned the journey that you took to get here. Just what was that moment like when you got the call that you're going to be the next Sox manager?
It was extremely emotional. I've been in this game a long time, and all I've ever wanted to do was manage a baseball team, right? And it didn't matter if it was the minor leagues or the big leagues I wanted to manage. This game has a tendency to kind of grab you and take you other places, and if you don't check yourself, you're going to end up somewhere where your passion doesn't sit, right? And that's where I was. This game took me into a scouting world. Then it brought me back to managing, took me to a field coordinator, and then it grabbed me and took me into the front office. And I was excited for a little bit, but after a couple, 2-3 years, that's not where my passion was. It's here on the field. It's wearing this uniform. Thank God I have them right there that they just made all the sacrifices in the world for me to be able to continue to do this, and here we are.
John?
Hey guys, you talked about that first meeting, and Rick, I'm curious what he said or what he kind of gave off that made you so convinced he might be the guy. And Pedro, I was kind of curious your approach to going into that meeting. You've wanted to be a manager for a long time. What was your approach, and what did you kind of want to? How do you want to market yourself, I guess, to this?
I think in that first meeting where he essentially knocked our socks off, we obviously had done a fair amount of due diligence beforehand on all these guys. It's part of the reason he was part of the 8 that we decided to sit down with. And I'd heard a great deal from people who had worked with him before, former players who had been with him, about his sort of special level of communication, his level of empathy for players, his ability to not sort of have broad proclamations, and this is who we are, but understanding each individual and what they need in order to achieve. I also understood that he was heavily involved in some pregame preparation and in terms of crafting sort of an offensive attitude for the team. And those were sort of points that I wanted to follow up and find out if they were real or not. Obviously, you're not hiring someone's reputation or who they worked for or their credentials. You're hiring the man in this instance. And coming out of that meeting, he came across as the real deal when it comes to connecting with people, motivating them, crafting a detailed, oriented plan for winning a ball game. And it really just clicked. I think that first meeting was, at least internally, you probably didn't know this, was supposed to be about 90 minutes, and I think we met for about almost 3.5 hours that day. Because it was just a hell of a conversation. As I said, as we walked out of there, you know, the bar was set extremely high for everyone else, and frankly, I had to check myself a couple of times to make sure I was going into subsequent interviews, you know, with a fully open mind, and you know, Jeremy and Getzy and Daniel did a good job of sort of keeping me on track with that, because, you know, thoughts kept drifting back to Pedro.
You know, for me, this is, I think, my 5th or 6th interview with different clubs. So what I got to do is just grab all my experiences and put them together. You know, I talk about all the things that I've done. I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change a thing. I know it's taken a long time for me to get to this seat, but I wouldn't change a thing, because every job I've done in this game have given me the resources to be able to troubleshoot anything that may come my way. I might not have the answer, but at some point, somewhere in a job that I had before, I'll find a way to troubleshoot whatever comes my way. So having interviews with different clubs, my approach remained the same. I just go in there and be who I am, what I really believe. Empathy is a big part of this thing. Communication is a big part of it. And basically my message is, you're seeing the guy today who you're going to see February 1st, the first day of spring training. I'm not going to sell you something that might sound good today, and then all of a sudden I'm somebody else when the time comes. That's not who I am. Who you see here sitting today is who you're going to see on February 1st, who you're going to see in June, July. And sometimes teams like that, sometimes they don't. You know, but I can't change. I can't change that. And all I can do is just go in there and you know, talk about what I'm going to do and who I am.
James.
Rick, could you kind of talk more about the process? I think you guys were the last team to fill your vacancy. You obviously took your time and was extensive. Is this the most extensive process you've been part of? And you talked about also learning about your organization through it. So in broad strokes, I imagine, what did you kind of learn about your organization through this process? And I think a lot of people latched on to you talking about looking at recent winning organizations. So how did you kind of discern the qualities that Pedro brought from, you know, the Royals' recent struggles, and whether or not anything was connected?
Don't tell people in this town that 2015, 2016 was a long time ago. Half the town will be pretty upset with you. Few things there. First, you asked about the process. Again, it was very extensive. It was, at one point, actually, I think about 2/3 of the way through it, I was on the phone with Jerry, and as we were talking through the candidates and where things sat and what was coming next, he said, you know what this process reminds me of? And frankly, I could have gone either way. Didn't quite know what the chairman, where he was going at that point. But he said, this reminds me of the process the Bulls used when we hired our tourists. And that made me proud. That, you know, because although we did not necessarily coordinate with them or get any sort of blueprint from them, I know that they went about it in a way where they were open-minded, looked outside the organization, got recommendations from a numerous or diverse group of individuals from around the game, and wound up making what, at least in my opinion, is a sensational hire over there. So that was good feedback, you know, midway through this process. We learned that a lot of again, talking to people who had prepared to play us in recent years, you heard sort of that dichotomy between who we were in 20, even 19, 20, and part of 21, to what we became in the latter half of 21 and 22. A lot of that was sort of confirmation for what we thought we were seeing, but in sort of hearing what you were able to observe from the other dugout or what you were doing to prepare for us off of video and advancing, it became evident that there was a number of things in terms of our internal pregame processes and how we go about our business that needed to be tightened up. It's one thing to say, we're not fundamentally strong or defensively strong, or we need to run the bases better. It's good to hear a fresh perspective on how we're going to go about improving those. Again, those shortcomings weren't for the lack of talent or lack of dedication from those coaches that may no longer be part of the staff. Hitting coach in particular, we had a great deal of success back in 20 with multiple silver sluggers. You heard me talk about our offensive prowess in 21. Hitting coach is just a difficult job, has the shortest self-life in the game of all the positions, and there does come a point where you need to make a change in that regard, despite the past success and talents of the individual, just because the message isn't getting through anymore. Coming up with different ways to address that and to deliver a solid message, whether it's tweaking the message or tweaking the drills and the prep work and how we go about preparing for an opponent, it was good to get some fresh perspectives on that as well.
David?
Pedro, you talk a lot about energy and intensity, a lot of old school principles you're going to bring here as the manager. How do you feel about the new modern baseball integrating analytics and using those with the kind of the approach that you just described?
Analytics is a big part of the game. I mean, I'm well versed in analytics. That's going to set the foundation for a baseball game, how to navigate a baseball game. There's no doubt. The team that we'll bring in for the hitting, they're going to be well versed in analytics too, and their program's going to be geared for pitchers with vert and horizontal movement and so on and so forth. So analytics is a big part of this thing, and it's going to lay the foundation on how we approach a given pitcher or a given team that particular night. However, these are humans; they're not robots, and things change, and we got to be able to make adjustments. And given my experience of managing in winter ball and dealing with analytics, I feel like we'll have a good base on what we need to do in any given situation in a ball game, whether it's analytically or dealing with the human element.
Mark? Oh, sorry.
What's up?
Hey, Rick, while you were going through the managerial hire process, you had a month to digest what happened, this past season, maybe digested it longer than the month. But when you look at the roster moving forward, do you have in broad strokes, an idea whether you need to make, I think people are trying to guess if you make, wholesale, but significant changes, or kind of supplement and add on to what you have in place right now?
I think we view this as still a championship caliber core. Obviously, we had significant regression across the board in several key players. I think job one is figuring out which of those are correctable and how are we going to get them back on track and performing at the levels that we previously saw and that I think was reasonable to project them for last season before they fell off. If we're able to accomplish that with numerous players, wholesale changes or a radical shift in direction is by no means necessary. Are there areas where we need to improve? Absolutely. We've hit on that already today, whether it's from regaining our offensive approach, staying healthier. Those are two keys to our success going forward. But improving ourselves defensively, how we run the bases, a little better lineup balance and approach to each at bat is called for as well. Whether that comes from internal improvement or external additions, ultimately we're hoping that's a combination of both. But we don't view this as drastic wholesale changes on the horizon. We need to get these guys back to the level they're capable of playing at.
When you're talking about the regression in certain players and you say to figure that out, I mean, it's got to be figured out kind of quickly, right? I mean, how do you put a finger on it, and if it is fixable?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
I said, you have to decide quickly on if you can fix the regression. So how do you figure out whether it is or isn't fixed?
I mean, there's certainly a analytical element to that in terms of looking at the underlying performance and what's replicable, repeatable going forward, or what's, a cause of concern. There's the health element. We have to understand exactly, what guys are potentially dealing with going forward and how we can project their health and availability going forward. But then there's also, look, the roster, we had a few guys playing out of position last year, just out of the way the roster fit together, and then driven even more significantly due to the injuries. We want to avoid that going forward. We want to get forward to the point where we have guys playing in a role they're more suited for, and if that means we got to make some alterations to the roster from the outside, that's what the route we'll have to go.
You're good, Vinny? Yeah. Okay. David, last one.
Rick, Pedro said he had talked to Charlie Montoya a few times in the past. Was adding him as the bench coach based on his experience your idea or his idea, or how did that come about?
It's a collaborative effort. It was something we talked about, I think, in our second meeting. It didn't come up during the first. It came up during the second. Look, Charlie's got a sterling reputation in this game and is viewed as one of the finer bench coaches of the last decade plus or so. Obviously, the world knew he was available. It tends to be a little bit of an insular community, so we knew that there was competition. There were multiple other teams pursuing Charlie. So midway through the interview process, we started talking about potential fits, and we certainly weren't looking to arrange any sort of marriage where the manager wasn't fully on board. Turns out that Pedro, I don't know if he raised it first or I raised it first during the second conversation, but it was going to be part of it, and certainly his enthusiasm from the jump was clear.
Pedro, Rick, thank you. Pedro, congratulations. I believe we're going to head out to the field to take some photos, so I think that's the next stop. And then people who are doing the one-on-ones will get set up, but check in with the media relations staff. That's not my bailiwick. Thanks for coming, everybody.